of music is to feel, more importantly than that it makes sounds, is that it gets in the experiencing body of both the performer and hopefully the audience. Interaction design, which assumes some kind of technology most of the time, certainly can be embodied and it can be authentic and truthful. It's just that quite often it isn't.
Welcome to Tech and the Arts, the podcast of the Arts Management and Technology Lab at Carnegie Mellon University, or for short, EMTLab. I'm Sofia Akhmanaeva, Marketing Manager at EMTLab, and today our guest is Dr. Stephen Neely. Stephen Neely is an Associate Professor of Dalcroze Eurythmics and Dalcroze License at Carnegie Mellon University School of Music, who also presents hands-on workshops in the US and around the globe, focusing on the overlaps between music, design, the body, aesthetics, performance, and experience. Hello, Professor Neely. It's very nice to talk to you today. And for those who don't know, I would like you to explain briefly what eurythmics is and why it is important for musicians and probably other artists too.
Right on. Well, it's nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Eurythmics is a 120-year-old practice that came out of a music conservatory in Geneva, Switzerland, beginning of the last century. The man who came up with the original ideas, his name was Émile Jacques Dalcroze, and he was working with young performers who had passed all kinds of auditions and were very fancy on their individual instruments. But as he met them at the conservatory, it occurred to him that in many cases there were big deficiencies or gaps, it would be a better way of saying it. There were big gaps in their prior education where certain aspects of their music making had been emphasized and other parts of music making, musical experience had been de-emphasized. And he thought, wonder if we can address this in some ways. So he began what was his life's work, a life's worth of what he called experiments, which were just doing new and weird things in the classroom to see if he could get his students to pay more attention to the feeling part of music rather than only the articulating or the sounding part of music. And what he ended up with after many years of messing around was a bunch of things, but maybe the most famous of his work is what we call the eurhythmics classroom, or in Europe they call it rythmique. And in this classroom Traditionally, there's a big open floor, there's hopefully a big acoustic piano. Someone who's teaching leads from the piano improvising musical experiences, and the students are led through these experiences in all sorts of bodied ways. The main sort of center of the work is that the role of music is to feel. It, more importantly than that it makes sounds, is that it gets in the experiencing body of both the performer and hopefully the audience. And so by inviting my students to participate in a very kind of visceral, literal, bodied sort of way, I can ensure that at least for the extent of the exercise, they're feeling things. And then we tie those feelings to musical gesture. And little by little, students who maybe didn't all come in with all of those instincts to begin with, little by little they start to, when hearing music or when imagining music, they start to develop the sensitivity to feel what that music is doing in their body or with their body. Big theme, which is maybe something I wouldn't be surprised if we end up talking about, is the difference between what is embodied experience and what is disembodied experience. And the eurythmics class is centrally concerned with that dichotomy.
Could you elaborate on this then? Because my next question is going to be about how technologies affect producing embodied experience and truthful experience, right, or artful experience, as you say. Could you then elaborate on embodied versus disembodied?
Yeah, and music's a great metaphor. In the eurythmics class, it's not just a metaphor, it is the central course of study, but it's actually a much larger set of ideas than is only applicable in music. What we are learning about with music as our main focus is equally and it's easily generalizable to any kind of experience. So if we think, I'm involved in a thing, or I'm doing a thing, I'm thinking about a thing, I'm participating in something, all of those would be different versions of experience. And anything like that, whether it's there's music playing in the room that I'm sitting in, or I'm going to the play where there's a stage actor and the lights are dimmed, or I'm going to open up my app and swipe left and swipe right, or I'm going to I'm going to carry around this Internet of Thing widget that's going to give you my biodata to the central database. Whatever the experiment is, if it's claiming to be an experience, that is something I'm involved in, then the only way I'm involved, that I'm actually involved in it, is that it somehow enters inside of me. It somehow wraps up me. My own personal motion, my own personal gesture, my very living is one of the ways I word it sometimes, is intertwined or entrained to whatever the experience would be. If we'd ever meet that threshold, if we fail to meet that threshold, then there maybe is something in the room with me, but it's not actually part of me. And in that respect, it's disembodied from me. So the music that's playing in the room that I don't actually feel, I hear it. I'm aware that there's noises coming from that speaker on the other side of the room, or maybe that person is sawing away on their violin and making noises, even though almost anybody, certainly in a Western context, would be able to say, oh, that's the sound of music. It doesn't actually count in my work unless the music transcends the sound on the outside of me and tips to the inside of me and actually moves me. So causes me to feel inner gesture, which is all different versions of tension and release, or of trajectory, or of suspension, and then resolution, all sorts of, there's a long list of ways that we can feel. If my own personal experience hasn't been affected in some way, then even though we all could agree there's music in the room, it isn't a musical experience for me. So we can take that metaphor then and then expand it into anything else. It doesn't have to be music. It could be any of the standard performing arts, but we can start to now look at technology, so much modern technology, as mini events that it's inviting me to participate in. Another example is the swipe left, swipe right, which fortunately I can tell you I have almost no experience with. I have none of these. I assume that's generic language for dating apps. I don't know if you swipe left and right on other things that aren't dating, but I've been married for 32 years, long before even the internet was involved, let alone these things. But we think, well, what's the goal of that app? And the romantic in me says, oh, it's to find my partner, like the best version of those apps, let me say. The best versions of those apps is to help me find my life partner, right? That's the goal. But the way I'm going to find my life partner has no bodied buy-in. The literal experience of the tip of my finger touching a piece of glass and then swiping 2 inches at most is such a severely limited interaction that I can't figuratively or literally feel the weight of the choices I'm making. If you compare that to what it would mean to be at a social event, and I look across the room at somebody's eye and their eye looks back at mine, just the eye contact is like carries weight, and it maybe freaks me out or maybe makes me very excited, but I'm in it now. That's moved me in some way. Just the eye contact is a gesture, and that to be pictured in a very literal way, it's a motion that I felt. I had nothing, and then all of a sudden I made the eye contact, and I could feel, and whether you're thinking about literal hearts beating or perspiration or just the sensation that something is starting, I've initiated the beginning of something, and how will it resolve?
Let's continue then with a broader context beyond music. You wrote in your dissertation, Soma-literate design, which you also can explain briefly what it means, that interaction design is a performing art, but at the same time you pointed out that it's not quite there to deliver truthful experience that would be comparable to the analog. Meanwhile, we have all these developments in the arts and different forms and spheres of arts when people experiment with VR, AR, and it's a new experience and it might feel very true, but let's talk about why it's not completely true in your opinion.
So I think that interaction design, that is the kind of what we think of as proper interaction design, which assumes some kind of technology most of the time, certainly can be embodied and it can be authentic and truthful. It's just that quite often it isn't. And a lot of the dissertation was just trying to point out to still what I think of as still a rather naive audience or an unrehearsed audience of designers that the body actually matters. It's still weird and funny to a lot of designers. Like, I don't think I'd have too many people argue with me these days, but I also don't believe I don't believe that the body up front and central is a required part of everybody's curriculum when they're trying to teach what is design and what is interaction design. I'm not sure that the feeling body is at the top of everybody's list. I hope it's more and more the case, and I'm sure it is more and more the case, but the tradition of design and where it came from, so much of what is modern interaction design is still being taught out of a base curriculum, a foundational curriculum that was two-dimensional and three-dimensional, as opposed to finding ways to comment on the 4D time-based body swept upness of the things we make. So Soma Literate Design and that dissertation was just trying to say, hey, you're getting into a new space here. I'm old enough, and I'm married to I'm married to a designer, and my middle son is a designer. So I feel like I'm deep enough in that world to remember when there was no 4D design, there was no temporal design, no body, like design proper, the design fields of architecture and communication design and product design didn't really have much need or opportunity to think about the evolving design, the participatory design. It was the designers, of course, with amazing instinct, which is a lot of them, they always had an instinct for it, but there was no practice. There was no sort of field. And as interaction design came along, it was very much technology-driven. Oh, check it out. We got an internet now. It does stuff. Let's play with that. And check it out. We've got Internet of Things. It does things. Let's play with that. And so very technology-driven and not particularly user-centric in any way, or trying to notice why is it that I want to fall in love with my phone and can't put it down. And like everybody's been trying to figure that out. So when I wrote Soma Literate Design, I was just trying to introduce really a musicianship of design to the design worlds, to say there's the same model that I described as the eurythmic kind of attention. We can bring that exact same attention into any kind of experience, not only the main stage music or drama or dance experience, but also we can look for those same ideas of gesture and gait and inner motion and embodied and disembodied. We can use that same language when trying to critique, does this app do what I want it to do? Or does this service design with my healthcare company do what I want it to do? And then when we think it doesn't do what I want it to do, the hope is that the Soma Literate designer would go, oh yeah, where's the body in that? Is it possible we kicked the body out the feeling body out while we pretended that we were involving them by only giving them the tip of a finger on glass, or pretended that we were involving them because we have their name in our database and they get an email every 3 weeks from us? And which I'm trying hard to say, yes, you sent them an email every 3 weeks, but is their own personal experience feeling anything? Are they involved in a suspension or a motion or a trajectory that they feel like they're getting somewhere? So I'm not sure I answered your question. What was the...
And could you explain why interaction design is performing art?
Oh, sure.
Where is the parallel?
Yeah, well, it should be a performing art is what I wanted to say. The interaction design should be, or aspires to, or is ideally a performing art in that when I am performing, and whether we could say I'm the performer or I'm the listener of the performance or I'm the audience of the performance, you could describe this either way. If I'm the performer on the stage and I have a violin in my hand and I'm sawing away at those strings, that actually doesn't yet assure that I'm in an embodied experience. So even performers aren't guaranteed performing artists. They are in the ideal way. In order for it to happen, the notes that I'm playing have to somehow speak to and from inside me. So I'm trying to make a point. I'm trying to resolve a tension. I'm trying to build a suspense. I'm trying to create a cadence, all of those feeling things, which is different than I wiggle my arm on the outside of my body and make it touch strings or touch keys or what have you. The goal is that it be the performing art. When interaction design is doing the shallow job, it just makes me push buttons. It makes me enter data. It's superficial, it's thin, and I go through the steps. If it's really doing the job that we would like it to do, then it somehow wraps me up. It pulls me in. It encourages me to feel something, and hopefully with a kind of a goal that I'm feeling myself go toward. So if Duolingo's doing a good job, it's at least partly getting me to show up every day. And so I have some sort of routine where it's become part of who I am. It's something I do. And so it's at least, if it's getting me to show up every day and play the game another time, that some part of that is working, I would say, similar to I'm wrapped up in an event, I'm wrapped up in a culture, I'm wrapped up in, I feel progress. If it had kicked me out of the experience and all that it did was just make me wiggle my finger, I just have the equivalent of tapping my finger all day long. And I can't imagine anybody would do that very long. And there's nothing inner rewarding about that. But if it can get you to keep showing up, there's something going there. I'm not sure it's the best example or that it's meeting all the needs, but it at least is getting the person involved in a way that pulls it forward. And then my angle on all of this is that the involvement is something deeper than just me thinking, I got to do this again. It's meeting some sort of inner need.
Let's get back to classical performing arts, so to say. And in this interaction between artists and the audience, there are two parts, right? It's artists who should have their own experience that is true to deliver artful thing to people, but it's also the audience who should be in a particular set of mind to receive it, and then some interaction actually happens. Do you think that the prevalence of technologies in our daily life affected somehow, and if yes, then how, the way both interaction directions work? Are people less or more?
Right.
Like how
well, I
interactions
don't have the data, so I'm not that person, but I'm sure some people do have some data. Yeah, certainly the prevailing opinions is that technology is encouraging a more and more disembodied experience. It's doing less and less to require us to be bodily invested. It's offering more and more opportunities, and in many cases nudges to push us out of the embodied experience. Again, go to the social event and meet your new partner, or that's nobody's instinct anymore. Everybody's instinct is to pull out the piece of glass and swipe your finger on it. So there was no option not that long ago, except you must go to the dance, you must go to the church, you must go to the university or the whatever where people are, and that's where you're going to find your partner. And now, again, I'm assuming that a lot of 20-somethings assumption is that, no, that's not at all where you start. You start on this app and you start by making your tip of your finger swipe glass. And then there's lots of other examples of that. And I hope I don't sound like a Luddite who doesn't think there's any good in technology. I don't think that at all. I'm very excited for my international Zoom calls and the ways that I get a chance to interact with people that I wouldn't have been able to interact at all with. And a whole bunch of that is quite embodied. But the fact that I have this kind of frictionless, like it took almost no effort at all to talk to my friend in Chicago just now. I was on a call. Whereas if I was really going to get the deep interaction with him, I'd have to buy the plane ticket and fly there. And then like how much richer would that be to be in person than it is to just have this sort of thin interaction? So I think there are all sorts of cases. Again, the Luddite rant would be, nobody reads books anymore and nobody knows how to use a library. And like we can just think of all the things that are now so easy to do and take no effort. And on the one hand, it's amazing and brilliant and great to have so much access to so many things. But I do think there is some cost. Please don't let me sound like that I never think the cost is worth it. And in many cases, the cost, we're yielding other things that are also quite valuable. And I was able to write a dissertation, being able to scour all of Google Scholar any second of the day. I didn't have to leave my house, and I had access to so many volumes that I would have literally never been able to get to because the actual print copy, there's one of them and it's in France. So I would have never been able to do the scholarship that I was able to do, as all of us are now. So there's so many good things about technology. However, there is this bracketed space that has to do with embodied and disembodied. And we look at loneliness epidemic, we look at mental health crises. There's all sorts of bits where the technology claims to be giving us an experience, but actually it's the facade or the shallow or it's the facade of the experience. Rather, it's the inauthentic experience rather than something that would have just been easily meaningful. And we've done a terrible job and by we, nearly universally everybody, whether it's the coder, it's the designer, it's the teacher, it's definitely the culture has done a terrible job of noticing what is the difference between something that actually feels honest and true and something that just is the thinnest, shallowest facade of something that is true. Again, back to the swiping left. So I think when we look at the bracketed space of who am I in my world? What is my agency? What do I have control over? What's it feel like to be alive? And how does technology encourage that? I think a lot of technology is actually discouraging my aliveness, my sort of participation in my world. I'm not sure that I'm yearning for the days where I had to plant my own garden to get all my food. But if I did, I know what I'm doing, and I'm physically doing the labor to yield the thing, and I had the time. I couldn't rush it. I couldn't just go out. I had to plan. And the arc, the suspense, the tension that is built up as I'm waiting for my zucchini to finally ripen, and then, oh my goodness, it's the day I get to harvest my zucchini. That is that gesture of my arm above my head, and how long can I sustain it before it's going to have to come back down and rest. And so those practices of years gone by, the embodied and the personal and the motion-filled and the visceral, it wasn't optional, and it was basically in everything. You couldn't do anything without doing it. And now we can do so many things and really not do it. I just, or certainly not know that I did it. Did I do that? Or did the thing do that? And what's the line between? So there's something there. There's something there. And I can go back to 120 years ago when Jacques Dalcroze found his first music students. Even then, long, of course, before all this technology, they could saw their bow over top of a violin, and yet not, or even easier, wiggle your fingers on top of a keyboard, and yet not have it come from a deep place inside you. And so the basis of his research, which is the basis of my research, is there is a deep place inside you. It does feel like living. And if we can infiltrate our living life with those gestures, notice them, search them, design them into experience, maybe we have a chance of making our daily lives richer.
Is it cool if I have some question I want to ask?
Of course, yeah.
From the point you were bringing just now, I really love the analogy. You were talking about how music and design are related to each other, and the last point you talked about how modern technology is making these bodily engagement more difficult. Then going to music playing, while you have those body engagement movements, it doesn't necessarily mean you have that. I would say perhaps, is it emotional connection? I want to say if there's a relationship between the embodiment and the intensity of emotional connection, or maybe even the duration of how impact of that emotional connection, where there's the relation or distinction between the two.
Yeah, I think all of that's certainly wrapped up in it. Emotion certainly is desirable and part of it, but it's actually, I think, a higher level thinking than is even necessary. So as emotion, like my happy, my sad, my excitement, my boredom, or whatever other categories of emotion you'd like to put on anything, those are all great. Those are all wonderful things, totally useful. There's even a layer below that, though, before I've had a chance to even decide, do I like it or don't like it, which is just that I know I was involved. So before I even have a chance to make a choice, to have an opinion, I first have to just participate. And then my opinion comes second. So the emotion that would come from something is a higher level analysis than is required to just participate. And so to know that I was in it, like I could come up from the side of you and you didn't quite see me, and I nudge you on your shoulder. I'll just give you a little shove. Nothing violent, just a little bit. And then you don't know yet to be offended or excited because you don't know where it came from. All you know is that something happened. There was an event. And it moved you, it touched you, and in this case, very literally. So it moved you, it touched you, and so then you have a moment of reflection, and you turn back on it, and you say, oh my gosh, it was my best friend, I haven't seen you in forever. Or you think, oh, it's that jerk, he's always bumping into me, he doesn't know. And so then you have an emotion, but the emotion, good or bad, actually wasn't a requirement for you to have just participated, for you to have been in. So if I understood your call, so what I'm mostly interested in is let's just have the participation. Let's notice when we're involved. And that same thing could have happened. You're on a balcony at a shopping mall, and you look at the crowd below, and you think for a half a second, oh, that's my best friend from years gone by. Just a half second. It didn't actually bump you literally on your shoulder, but you think you saw that person. And so for a moment, you have this suspense of, oh, what's going on? And this slight excitement. And then you have to decide what's your emotion about it. I know that person. I don't know that person. They're real. They're not real. But you had the experience. It's in maybe a very similar way to me shoving you on your shoulder. Something happened just now. It wrapped me up. It touched something on the inside of me. It's unresolved until it resolves. And so all of that is what I would call a gesture, some kind of inner experience, inner motion. The shoving of you is an external, actual thing that happened, but the meaning behind it, the gesture that we're trying to get to. So I like although I think it's a deep example of musicians wiggling their fingers on piano keys, so your listeners will be patient with me as I try to say it, but we all know that we can wiggle our fingers in lots of ways. It doesn't make it a meaningful thing. And some of us have learned to wiggle our fingers in ways that make culturally desirable sounds. Look at that. That was a consonant. That was a major chord. And another, it's a blues scale. How exciting. That person knows a blues scale. And yet that doesn't mean that the person playing it was using it as a way to translate something of their inner experience. The best artists, or the artists that I want to work with, or the artists I'd like to raise up, we start with what do you want, and then we try to use our instrument to share that with others. And I think if we then try to flip it back to technology and designers and tech and the AR, VR, or even your little apps on your phone, we could certainly say, well, what is the experience you want? What are you trying to help this person do? It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be as big a deal as a full-stage opera or life-changing as finding your life partner. It really could just be, no, I just want them to smile for a minute playing Candy Crush, or I want them to, it could be something very silly or dumb or simple or short. But if we as Soma literate designers can just start to notice the difference between personally meaningful and absolutely shallow and inauthentic or fake or facade or just going through the motions of something, then we at least could more clearly talk about what we're doing. I know I'm designing a throwaway interaction. I don't expect it to be anything more than this. I only need them to do it for freaking 6 seconds, and I get everything that I need it to be. I'm never going to see this person again, and it's probably perfectly fine. But if what I need is a relationship, or I want the person to feel like they're a member of a club or a member of a community, or what I need is as a much more long-term commitment, and I need them to still be a member of the study 20 years from now, so I have to get something going that they feel like they're a part of it. And that is all kind of inner work. There's no on the surface of me work that will be able to sustain something that deep.
We talked about this line between true and not true, and to me it feels like it's like vagus nerve. It's very vagus line. It doesn't lie somewhere as an actual line that doesn't have any curves and just go from point A to point B. I will give you 2 examples, and I want you to say if it's true or not, and why. One of them, the first one, is more general, about using generative AI in visual arts. When people use AI to create part of the work, is it true? Is it not true? Does it make work real or not? In which particular cases?
I think the answer goes back to true for who is a really important clarification. So I don't think anything just is. It's always is for on behalf of who. You used the example a little bit ago of there's somebody on stage making music and there's somebody in the audience making music. Is the music true? You didn't say that part. Now I'll add that. Is the music true? Well, actually, that's an incomplete question. Is the performer coming from some sort of personal position? Is it true for them? That is to say, are they sharing something authentic? Does it feel like motion to them? Does it come from something deeper inside them than they're trying to relay it? That doesn't guarantee what the audience member is going to get. We think as music professors and as main stage performers, we think we have a decent amount of control over it, but actually we have very little control over what an audience receives. The audience member the question is not, was the music true. The question is, did they have an authentic experience inside themselves? And they can have an experience based on great playing by my standard or horrible playing by my standard, by live, in the moment, acoustic, literal vibration, analog playing, which is everything I love. They also could have that by an AI-generated algorithm, and it somehow swept them up. It somehow convinced them that something happened inside them. And I think it's very possible that all kinds of AI-generated stuff in our future will be impactful in all kinds of ways. I'm hopeful, and I'm pretty sure it won't be impactful in all ways or in all the same kinds of ways that an analog, live human is going to be able to pull off. But I'm sure as the technology gets better and better, we will all be fooled in more and more ways into believing. And I'm not even sure that it matters, like for the rant that we're on today in this interview, it doesn't matter that it be live. That isn't the only thing that is true. Because what's true, the truth that we're looking for, is the truth inside of you. Did you have an experience? Did you feel something? Now, if what I would like is a relationship, then we could go off on a whole nother thing about the way we relate to our AIs, and can you fall in love with your AI, and should you be dating your AI, which I gather now is totally a thing. And there's a whole nother pile of whoop-ass that's about to come out with all of that. But I'm not sure that it changes what is authentic to the individual. That is, I can be lulled into all kinds of environments and feel like it was meaningful to me. And which is maybe a lot of the danger, like one of the big existential dangers of the AI that's coming, is that it could lull you into something, making you believe or have a series of experiences that then it will have to fall short of it some further way compared to the human. I'm still working all this out myself. I don't know all these answers, but I do think that, at least for the first part of your question, AI-generated art can be beautiful to the person who's looking at it. And it can, just as all kinds of human-made art is horrible to lots of other people. They're just like, I would never engage with that.
I'm glad you brought it to the audience side, because the next example, and I believe the answer that you just gave is applicable to this example too, but this example is about specifically the artistic side. So, in Sweden, researcher and composer Fredrik Grant designed and developed a cello-playing robot for another Swedish composer. And this robot performed with Malmö Symphony Orchestra. And the composer Jacob Mulrad said that such robot will, of course, not replace a musician, but this kind of art can become its own art form. So if we have the robot literally on the artistic side, how does that affect the truthfulness of experience, or it's still on the audience side?
Well, it's truthfulness of experience. Again, it's not just one thing. So there is an audience side, and I think the audience will be wrapped up in whatever they're in the mood to be wrapped up in, or whatever they allow themselves to be wrapped up in. And the instigator of the wrapping up, of the getting swept up, either the live cellist or the robot cellist or the algorithmic just audio cellist that came out of the AI, they'll be more and less successful in different cases, but it's really that audience member who is open to an experience and has found something in it that feels like something to them that they're willing to get swept up in. On the part of the creator, though, I'm quite happy with my definition that says artistry begins with choices. And so if the AI isn't actually making choices, if it is making choices or it isn't making choices, I'm pretty sure that AI doesn't make choices. I think it is grabbing from some sort of data pool and ranking things, but I don't think it's actually in the choicing level. So I'm pretty sure that I'm confident in saying I don't believe any AI can be an artist. Which is not the same thing as it can't create an artful experience or can't be the instigator of an artful experience. But I don't think that an AI can be an artist, even if it makes an image that I've never seen and that somebody thinks is beautiful, or if it can create a musical line that we've heard or never heard before and somebody thinks, oh, that was moving. I think the move of the artist, which at this point I'm pretty sure has to be a human, just flicking in my head, can dogs be artists or can monkeys be artists? But I don't think they can. I don't think I'm ready to say that, is that it's this kind of very special exercise where I'm playing within some kind of bounds. I have a boundary, sort of a set of assumptions, and then I'm pushing on those assumptions in some way to see where it takes me. And so the choicing part is, oh, I know that's an edge, I'll push on the edge, and we'll see does it break? Does it expand? Does it stretch? Does it squish? Does it reveal something new? Does it make noises I didn't expect? Like all of those kinds of things, that all falls under the heading of artistry for me. So I spend a lot of time with my musicians who are mostly 20-year-olds. So they have a nice amount of life experience, but I'm pushing triple their age these days. So it's still quite limited. And I'm always on the lookout, expecting that many of my students are just going through the motions. That's just what I expect of a good 20-year-old, is that a good musician 20-year-old, is that they're not quite in the artistry game yet. They're not quite making choices. Certainly they are in some cases and here and there, and certainly some students are amazing when they were 14. Like, there's lots of that. But on the average, a younger musician is still just trying to figure out how to make their instrument work. They're just trying to make the sounds they want it to make. And so rather than creating things, they're just trying to just make the sounds, and the easiest way to do that is just do what somebody told you to do. I'm following this score, I'm going to play these notes, or I'm playing the notes that somebody wrote on a piece of paper, or I'm playing back the melody that somebody else made, and I'm trying to play it like they play it. I love the way they play it. If only I could make it sound like that person. And so they're trying to, it's a kind of rudely, I'll say, paint by numbers. Like, somebody just give me the recipe so that I could do it. And you can get far with that. It's how everybody starts. It's how I start. I still have all kinds of parts of my life now where I'm painting by numbers because I'm just not good enough to be artful at the thing I want to do. I think there's almost no other way to do it except that. You have to mimic and imitate and just let somebody tell you what to do. I'm trying to bake bread right now. And
I saw on your Instagram
I am
page.
not.
It's
I made
amazing.
some pretty bread last weekend, but I'm nowhere near an artist. I am just barely holding on to get my sourdough starter to do what it's supposed to do. And so what we're looking for in the students is that the opportunities for them to offer something of themselves, for them to stretch the practice, for them to stretch their practice. Maybe it would get to a point where it would stretch the practice of violin playing or of orchestra composition or of bread baking. And I'm not sure that AI can do any of that stuff. In fact, I'm pretty sure my understanding currently is it absolutely can't. It can only offer what is in some version of the data set it already is in possession of. So I'm not sure it can innovate anything new. I'm not sure. You guys maybe know better than me. But if I understand it a little bit, the AI can only work with what it's been given. And it can draw things that we didn't realize was a pattern. It can reveal things that were already there. But I think the point is they were already there. It's not actually new. And whereas the artist aspires, as does the academic, by the way, is to create new knowledge, to push into a space that we've not really gone there before. And every once in a while somebody hits gold. But mostly we're all just stumbling along, trying to push on our envelopes.
Could you talk more about your current experiments and research in motion and technologies?
Yeah, let's think.
You mentioned that you do something with motion capture tech to produce some kind of artwork.
So I've played in those spaces a bit in the past. I'm not doing any of that kind of stuff right now.
You mentioned Arduino and making wire sculptures.
Yeah, okay.
Motion
I can talk about that. What I'm working on now, my current research, is trying to, it's basically a dissertation part 2. It's an extension of the ideas I began 10 years ago, where we're now trying to lay out a framework for practicing experienced designers. So whether they're experience design or service design, anybody, interaction designers, anybody working with body and time in their designs. And so it's all versions of service, it's all versions of experience, and lots of things hit that threshold. Even architecture, or which we think of as just like bricks and buildings, has deep experiential components to it, which architecture, of course, has been more and more aware of the last 25 years. Anyway, part of what's going on there is a describing, we start by saying this is what a body is, this is what the experiencing body is all about. Here's a body, it's flesh, it's inner feelings, it's emotions, it's all the things that bodies are, and it's beating, it's living, it's never static, it's always in motion. And so we start with this thing called a body, and then there's the second chapter is all about this is what time is, and by time we mean experienced time. So there's Chronos time, which is stopwatch time, the tick-tick of your watch kind of time, which is a life-depleting kind of time. And then there's Kairos time, which is, we call it the opportune moment kind of time where things come together. It's serendipity, it's vibrance, it's aliveness, the kind of time that wakes you up, the feeling of time, mounting, not the feeling of time depleting. So we spend, chapter 1 is body, and chapter 2 is time, and chapter 3 is all kinds of variables of experience that a designer could mess with, like meter and tempo and agogics and rhythm and orchestration, or ideas of like togetherness versus separateness. So there's a whole bunch of discrete concepts that we can critique any experience with, a lot of very musical concepts in there. And then we set up a framework that says, okay, here's some steps to go about making or analyzing any experience or any temporal or time and body-based design. And I don't know if I have these memorized. Step 1 is reveal the in-time experience. So when we say what just happened there, I went to the bar and I made eye contact with the person, and then they shut me down, and then I went home feeling defeated. So the question would be not what happened, but what's the soma literate read of what just happened? And so the common way we would describe it is a shopping list. We would say, well, thing 1 that happened is I got in my car and I drove to the bar. And then thing 2 was I opened the door and I sat at a table. And thing 3 was I ordered a drink. And then thing 4, the fourth thing that happened was I saw the person. And then thing 5 was they scowled at me and I went home defeated. And so we, like a shopping list, ding, ding, there's 5 things that just happened. None of that is the experience. The actual experience was all the space between those shopping list checkpoints. So those were checkpoints. They happened. They were markers. They were, what's the word that means like flags on the road? They were little flashes of something happened. But the actual experience was the space going toward and away from the thing that I made my checkbox about. And so the experience part of making the eye contact wasn't the instant that our eyes locked. It was the build up to the instant that our eyes locked. And then once our eyes locked, that happened in a flash, not even measurable how long that took. The instant that our eyes locked. The instant that our eyes locked is the edge of a knife. There's no way to hold on to the instant that they actually locked. What I was left with was all the space that our eyes remained locked, and what was the feeling of feeling insecure as our eyes looked at each other. And so the experience of that one part of being at the bar was the build up to, toward, and away from the eye lock. And so the first part of this framework is to say you got to get in that space, the space between the shopping list check marks. And then once you are in that space, the second part is to look for the gestures. So first, I realize I'm not looking for a bunch of Post-its on a wall that are just going to tell me all the things that happened. I'm looking for space between Post-it notes, space between checkboxes. Then I'm going to describe what those are. What were the gestures of the event? And so what was the bodied motion, the inner heave and flow, the tension and release? How many motions were there in the thing I'd like to describe? And if it's a really good experience, they were continuous and one led to another. And all of a sudden, a thing happened, like all of that together happened. And then the third part, which is what took me a long way to get to this, is what were the shape of those gestures? What's the shape of a gesture? And the thing is, not everything feels steady or single directional. Sometimes things build and mount. They swoop and curve. They ricochet. They jag. There's all sorts of ways that an experience unfolds. Some things unfold just so beautifully that it's just like magic. It's like beauty in motion. But most of mundane life isn't nearly so beautiful. It's like awkward and stumbly. And so we've been trying to figure out ways to get people, designers who might read this research, to understand this very abstract idea of what would be the shape of the gesture. Hard enough to get people to even notice that there are gestures happening all the time. Your life is a series of gestures. Your life is not a shopping list of check boxes, even though that seems to be the only way anybody knows how to describe it. It's, what did you do yesterday? Well, I did this checkbox. That was my day. No, it wasn't. Your day was none of those things. Your day was all the space between those things, the way you got to and toward and away from those checkboxes, and the way you got toward and away from them was more or less beautiful and awkward. Some of them, it just flowed. I got right from where I was to where I wanted to be and then on to the next thing and just bang, I couldn't have been simpler or smoother. So what was the shape of that? Well, it's probably some sort of like simple arc, or maybe you thought of it as a straight line, or very direct, very clean, very simple. But then I was trying to all I wanted to do was sweep the floors of my kitchen, but my dog kept getting in the way, and then my kid this, and then the doorbell rang, and I just could not get that checkbox checked off. And so it was all this zigzagging and starting and stopping and then restarting. And so I had to go backward and forward and backward and forward, and eventually I made it through the event. It took these 20 gestures, the shape of those gestures were in all of these not straight line, beautiful arcs. It was a bunch of kind of weird jaggeds and interruptions and whatever. And so we've been trying to think, how could you represent the shape of that interaction? So we were just brainstorming a bunch of ideas. So you could draw it on a piece of paper with pencil and paper. You could choreograph it as a dance. You could just, here's my interpretive dance of my day trying to sweep my kitchen floor. There are these CNC wire bending machines that exist under the sun. It's got a spool of wire and then a series of little servo actuators, and computer knows forward the wire at a certain pace. And then relative to the pace of the wire, which is in the best versions variable, relative to the pace, the actuators are going to bend the wire in one direction or another. It's how paper clips are made. So the paper clip comes through a machine, and the machine knows, oh yeah, now it's time to bend it this hard, this fast, so that it gets that perfect curve. And then now don't bend it. It has to be straight for a little bit, but now bend it again. And it can rotate the wire and bend it in different ways. And we thought, and there's all sorts of, this wasn't completely our idea. There's been lots of artists playing with bent wire for a long time to represent lots of things. But we decided, that would be a fun way to experiment with. I wonder if I could bend a wire to be the shape of the interaction. And so that's where my motion capture questions that you're recalling came from, because there was a couple weeks a semester ago where I was very wound up with the idea of motion capture and taking the data from that and feeding it into a wire bending machine and see if I could get it to wire bend the choreography of you doing anything. Then I thought of it further. When you would have heard me talking about that, I was new in my thoughts on that particular thing. And what I realized was I still like the wire bending thing a lot, but the only thing motion capture can capture is the literal motion of me sweeping my kitchen floor or of me doing whatever. It's actually not the part of the experience I'm interested in. I'm not interested in what did you literally look like. I'm interested in what did you literally feel. So what was the feeling of tension? What was the feeling of release? What was the feeling of aggravation? What was the feeling of ease? When was it like the easiest part? And so it's just simple and straight. And then what was the part that you could feel it mounting? And so maybe it's got some kind of arc to it. And then what was the spot where you felt stuck? And so how would we represent stuckness in a bent wire? Maybe it twists on itself or it gets a knot in it somehow before it moves forward. And so it's that kind of inner hidden part of experience that I'm dissatisfied with motion capture because it can't capture the inner.
It sounds like there should be some other data set representing how brain works.
Yeah. And then we could say, and how much do we want to call it brain and how much do we want to call it inner feel? I like this word called the interoceptive, which is the inner sensation. I think it's helpful to say what I inner feel isn't always what I inner think. Our goal would be to get the two aligned so that I could think and feel as one, but quite often our brain trails off and our innards still are feeling. Like I can say, you could jump out of a corner and scare me, and then I'll scream, and then I'll laugh because that was so ridiculous, or I'll be angry with you because of whatever, but I know there's nothing to be afraid of, but the adrenaline that's already in my body is in my body, and so I'm still feeling anxious, even though my mind tells me there's nothing to be anxious about. When we're in our most holistic us, everything gets aligned and we get to feel what we think and it all goes together. But yeah, I would love to have that data set that is my inner feels, my inner gesture story. That was a lot of words. That was so many words.
Thank you very much for all your words. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, I wish we had another hour.
Well, you can always call me up. These are fun questions, and this is totally the stuff that I'm spending so many hours right now thinking about. So it's a good exercise for me to try to say things out loud. Yeah. All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tech in the Arts, the podcast series of the Arts Management and Technology Laboratory. If you found this episode informative, educational, or inspirational, be sure to check out our other episodes and share with the arts or technology aficionados in your life. Check out our website at amtlab.org, that's amt-lab.org, or you can email us at info@amtlab.org. Follow us on Instagram at Tech in the Arts or Facebook and LinkedIn at Arts Management and Technology Lab. Our season runs from September through May, so feel free to follow us on your preferred podcast app. Thanks for listening.